Chapter 4. Mike waited for the door to close. He listened to Max's footsteps tap across the concrete porch. As soon as he was sure she was gone, he clenched his fists and squeezed his eyes closed so hard that his entire body trembled. Mike clamped his mouth closed, too. If he hadn't, he was sure he'd have screamed. A wail of despair and frustration and fury was churning in his chest, and it took everything he had not to let it come roaring out, leaping up his throat like a lion finally free from a cage. Gazing at the delinquency notice, Mike thought about his aunt's message. Or else. Mike knew what that meant. Damn his Aunt Jane! When was she going to back off? Mike shook his head. Never, he said aloud. Taking a deep breath, he shoved aside thoughts of his aunt. Smelling the lasagna sauce and cheese, he thought about eating, but that idea immediately brought a wave of nausea. Mike stood up and looked at the half-eaten pan of lasagna. It was cold, and the cheese was starting to congeal. He was tempted to dump it in the trash, but maybe if he warmed it up, he could get Abby to eat. Not holding his breath, but figuring he should try to feed his sister, Mike put the lasagna in a little microwave next to the stove. He pressed a couple buttons and turned to head toward Abby's room. As Mike rotated, he saw the delinquency notice. His rage and frustration combusting, he grabbed it, balled it up, and flung it into the plastic bin under the kitchen sink. Then he kicked the bin, slammed the cabinet door, and looked up at the dirty white ceiling. 3 feet above Mike's head, a spider was scurrying up a long strand of webbing. The webbing was attached to a half-completed web that stretched from a grungy glass ceiling light to the corner of the room. Go, Mike said to the spider. He hoped the thing had better luck at getting his home in order than Mike was having. Abby loved her hidey tent, but she also loved her desk. Too bad she couldn't fit her desk inside her hidey tent. Drawing was much easier at her desk. Toying with the shoulder strap of her favorite red overalls, Abby looked at the array of colored pencils splayed out next to her drawing pad. Which green would be better for the big tree? Deciding, Abby picked up the darkest green pencil and began carefully sketching in the fluffy edges of a tall pine tree's branches. The squat orange metal lamp that sat on her desk shone down on the tree like sunshine, making the yellow sun Abby had already drawn above the tree even brighter looking. The golden warmth of the desk lamp made Abby's animally friends and the black-haired man and black-haired little girl under the tree look even happier than Abby wanted them to look. Even as Abby bent over the task of creating dozens of little green pine needles on the tree, she glanced at the creatures she'd drawn and at the man and girl. She meant for it to look like they were all playing Ring Around the Rosie, and she wasn't sure she'd pulled that off. But the big curved smile she put on their faces made it clear they were playing and having a good time. For a second, Abby's pencil stopped moving as her feelings pushed past her concentration on the drawing. If only the drawings could come true. Abby wished Mike would play with her sometimes. He used to, but lately... Behind Abby, her bedroom door squeaked. She glanced over her shoulder as Mike stepped into the room. Mike lifted a hand in greeting, and Abby returned the gesture. Then she swiveled back around and bent closer to her drawing. She went back to sketching in green pine needles. What are you drawing? Mike asked as his shuffling steps crossed her carpet. Trees, Abby said simply. She looked up when Mike stopped beside her white desk chair. The desk chair was what they called a ladder-back chair. Mike had told her that. She didn't like it as much as the desk. It was hard and made her back hurt if she sat in it for too long. That was why sometimes she drew in her tent, even though the drawings she did there were never as good. Mike's arm slipped past Abby's shoulder. He tapped the man on a drawing. This good-looking dude I recognize, Mike said. He moved his fingers to one of Abby's friends. Who are these punks? Abby kept working on the tree. My friends, she said. It's not done yet. Mike sighed loudly in Abby's ear. She ignored his unspoken criticism. She knew how he felt about her friends. The floor creaked as Mike took a step back away from Abby's chair. You can finish later, he said. The words sounded sad. It's time to eat. Abby set down the green pencil and picked up a yellow one to add a little more detail to one of her friends. Not hungry, she said. Mike let out another sigh. Abby didn't feel this one, but it was louder. Don't care, Mike said. You need to eat. Let's go. The floor creaked again, and Mike's hand closed around Abby's upper arm. He attempted to pull her from her chair. No! Abby shrieked as she dropped her pencil and whirled to face her brother. The word came out like a siren from her mouth, the one small sound raising and lowering in pitch and volume. Abby twisted her arm to shake off Mike's hand. As soon as Abby pulled away from Mike, he let go of her. Abby rubbed her arm. It didn't really hurt. Mike had held her firmly, but he hadn't been rough. He was never rough. Sighing for the third time, Mike backed away from Abby and sat down on the edge of her bed. She sat in her chair and watched him. The thin mattress sank under his weight, and the box springs let out a squeak. Mike rubbed his palms over his face. Then he looked at Abby as if he was about to beg her for a favor. Abs, he said, his voice really soft. The day I'm having... Mike swallowed and shook his head. Just please come and eat some food. Please. Abby looked at her brother. She thought he looked pale, and the little lines at the outside corners of his eyes were bunched up tighter than usual. She shifted her gaze at the mattress. You're sitting on my friend, Abby said. Mike snorted and stood. You know what? Do whatever the hell you want. I don't care. Mike started stomping toward the door, but then he stopped. He spoke again, with his back to Abby. But you should know what happens to little kids who don't eat their dinners. Mike rotated toward Abby in super slow motion. He squinted at Abby and scrunched his face into what Abby thought was supposed to be a mean look, like he was trying to be one of the bad guys in a cartoon. Abby didn't feel like playing along with Mike's stupid game, so she stayed silent. She looked at him, careful to keep her face totally blank. When kids don't eat, Mike said, leaning forward. Their bodies stay the same size forever. Abby shrugged and rolled her eyes. Mike waggled a finger at her. And that means they die without ever getting to ride the adult rides at the amusement park. Abby almost smiled at that, but Mike didn't deserve a smile. Abby looked away from Mike, back to the now empty bed. She studied the spot where Mike had sat. My friend says you're an idiot, Abby told Mike, glancing toward him again. Mike's face went rigid. A vein at the edge of his forehead got bigger and looked like it was hopping up and down under his skin. Abby thought she could hear his teeth grinding as he turned around and headed toward her door. Just out of the door, Mike stopped. He looked back at Abby. At least I'm real, he said. His voice was hard and unfriendly. Mike strode out of the room and slammed the door behind him. The kablam took a couple of seconds to fade out. The yucky feeling Mike left behind lingered for longer than that. Abby looked over at the bed. He doesn't mean it, she said quietly. He has stress. From behind the door, Mike's bellow was muffled and distant. No, I don't! He shouted. Mike dropped onto the edge of a turned-down bed. He sat down so hard that the bed's wood-slatted headboard knocked against the wall. As if in response to the thud, a dog barked in the distance. The cheer crackle of tires on the street and the purr of an engine reached in through Mike's closed window. Mike looked at his pillow. All he wanted to do was flop down and put his face in it, make like a human ostrich, and block out the day. But he couldn't sleep yet. Raising his butt off his bed, half standing, Mike reached under his mattress and grabbed his pill bottle. Wrapping his fingers around the hard, smooth plastic, he closed his eyes, savoring the momentary relief he always felt when he started his nighttime routine. Mike opened the bottle's child-proof cap and pulled out one of the small white pills. Immediately popping the pill in his mouth, Mike reached for the glass of water he put on his nightstand. He took a few steps of water, washing down the pill. Finally, Mike had put this day behind him. Leaning forward, Mike pushed play on the cassette player. Immediately, his bedroom was filled with peaceful forest sounds. Mike closed his eyes and focused on the sprightly chirps of birds, the cracks and snaps of branches being rustled by the wind. He took a deep breath and let it out slowly. Then he lay down flat on his bed. Opening his eyes, Mike looked straight up above his head, seeing past the images of the day that flicked through his mind like a herky-jerky slideshow. Mike focused on the poster taped to his ceiling. Pining for fun? The poster's heading read, Visit Nebraska. The words popping from the paper in a bright yellow block letter font paraded across the tops of a shaggy cluster of pine trees. As Mike gazed at the trees, the slideshow in his head continued. He saw the ugly brick government building, the social worker's uneven skirt, and the paper number 27. He saw Raglan's smug face. He saw a series of help wanted signs, and a matching series of head shakes as he was told he wasn't right for the jobs. He saw Max's big eyes and Abby's dark ones. He saw the red delinquency notice, and the lasagna he ended up throwing away because he'd microwaved it too long and because Abby had never come out of her room to eat. Breathe, he told himself, zeroing in on the sounds of babbling brook that were coming from his cassette player. He squinted at the pine trees, putting all his attention on his ritual so he could let the rest of the day fade away. Briefly, Mike remembered the first night he'd put up the poster. It had seemed like such a stupid idea, but he was desperate. That night, it had taken forever for the cassette sounds and the poster's image to work their magic. Now, though, the effect was more immediate. In a matter of seconds, Mike's mind let go of the day's impressions. His consciousness slipped into the pine tree scene, and the forest sounds grew clearer, more and more realistic. Mike's gaze was full-on committed now. He was homed in. The forest was no longer a picture on a poster. The trees weren't frozen in a photograph. They were moving. The sounds didn't come from a cassette. They came from a real forest. The wind that Mike could hear was swaying the trees in a gentle back and forth rhythm. Mike's eyelids began to flutter. Then he felt them droop, lower and lower, closed. But the trees didn't disappear. A gentle breeze caresses the heavy branches of a cluster of pine trees. The branches shimmy back and forth in what almost looks like a choreographed dance. In front of the trees, a beam of sunshine slants downward onto bright green wild grass. The light catches moisture at the tips of the grass blades, making them sparkle. Above the grass, caught in the sun's brilliant illumination, an orange toy plane arcs through the air. A little boy's hand grips the body of the plane. The little boy looks to be about 4 years old. The boy has tousled black hair and bow-like lips. "Garrett," a woman's voice calls out. "Stay close." Garrett and his airplane whip past a picnic table and disappear from view just as a red spray of ketchup splats over a burger on a paper plate lying on the table. A smiling, dark-haired man who looks like an adult version of little Garrett walks past the picnic table. The man, carrying a couple sleeping bags, laughs and calls out, "How about some burger with that ketchup, hon?" Mike, 12 years old and all about having fun, grins at his mom. She looks at the ketchup bottle in her hand and winks at Mike. "Everything's better swimming in ketchup. Right, Mike?" "Right." Mike reaches for his soda and accidentally knocks over the bottle with a thunk. The soda's fizzing escape from the bottle sprays across the table. The frothy, brownish liquid sounds like it's sizzling as it pools on the wood. "Oops," Mike's mom says. She turns away from the table. "I'm going to grab a towel. Keep an eye on your brother." Mike starts to run towards Garrett, but as he does, the edge of a frisbee nearly grazes Mike's cheek as it whizzes past. Mike instinctively jumps up and jogs away from the picnic table to retrieve the bright blue disc, which has landed at the edge of his family's campsite. Mike reaches the frisbee in seconds, and he bends over to pick it up. As his hand closes over the plastic rim of the disc, Mike hears the sound of a car engine revving. Mike straightens and looks around. He doesn't see the car, but there's something else even more important that he doesn't see. "Garrett!" Mike calls. Garrett is nowhere in sight. Frisbee dangling from his hand, Mike starts walking out toward the far side of the campsite. His pace is casual at first, then his brother's continued absence fills him with urgency. Mike starts trotting toward the trees that line the little road that leads to the site. "Garrett!" Mike calls again. Mike hears the crackling, pinging sound of tires churning over gravel. Through the trees, he sees the hulking shape of a black car as it peels away from the campground. Mike breaks into a full run. "Garrett!" Mike's shout is shrill and piercing. Mike is in the trees now. The long pine needles poke at his face. The branches slap at him. It feels like they're trying to grab him. Fallen twigs and pine cones crackle under Mike's feet. His nostrils are filled with the sharp smell of pine resin and the moist scent of the ground's soft soil. Mike bursts out of the trees just in time to see the black car pick up speed. The car is at least 50 feet past Mike. It's zooming away. Mike, panting hard, looks toward the back of the car. His heart feels like it's being twisted in his chest as he looks out car's rear window. "Garrett!" Mike gasps. Garrett's pale, wide-eyed face looks back at Mike through the window. Clutching his orange airplane, Garrett puts a hand to the glass. Garrett's eyes are filled with tears. His mouth is wide open, calling out. Mike opens his mouth, too. He starts to let out a scream. The beep, beep, beep of Mike's alarm felt like a lasso that cinched up around him and yanked him out of sleep. Pulling a face, Mike reached for his alarm. Today, his palm managed to find the top of the alarm. As soon as the beeping stopped, Mike smoothly went through his morning routine. Cassette player off, rewind, pills under the mattress, push-ups. Mike's head didn't hurt as much this morning, but that didn't mean he felt any better. He wouldn't feel better until he could fix things. And after 13 years of trying, he was starting to think that would never happen.